Welcome everyone to Mailfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the X-Files Season 2 Episode 19. It's called Død Kalm, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But spoilers for the episode, which this one follows Mulder and Scully going to Norway and taking a boat out to an abandoned naval ship, which all of the people who evacuated the ship effectively died of old age, rapid aging, seemingly. And they're out there to investigate what caused this. And Mulder is especially fascinated because there has been multiple ships over the last century that have seemingly had some sort of incident like this in this particular part of the ocean near Norway. And he links it back to the Philadelphia experiment and thinks it's something to do with that, something to do with a wormhole or some such. And while the captain of this ship, who they do find alive, although not for very long, does say that they saw a light and then that time kind of vanished, they lost time. Most of the plot revolves more around this thing that's infected the water, that's oxidating everyone's bodies quickly, and even the ship's rusting quickly, like the human bodies that are drinking the water are seemingly aging quickly, although it is reversible. And that was pretty obvious. As soon as I knew going into this that Mulder and Scully were going to suffer the effects of this and have old age makeup on, obviously they were going to fix it, because we're not going to have Mulder and Scully with old age makeup on for the next 10 seasons or whatever it is. So obviously it was going to somehow be flipped in reverse. So obviously it's not actually old age makeup, or it's makeup. You know what I mean? I'm losing my train of thought here. Okay. Here's the thing. The old age makeup gave me pause. I was a little bit worried because of the old age makeup, but everything else about the premise, I like bringing up the Philadelphia experiment. That's kind of fun. I also like the secluded location. Some of the best X-Files episodes we've had so far have been in secluded locations where it's just Mulder, Scully, and maybe a couple of guest stars at most, and playing up the creepiness, the eeriness. I was excited for those elements, so I wasn't really sure which side of the fence I was going to land on when all was said and done and I'd watched the episode. And it is kind of a mixed bag overall because of this, because I do think some of the shots in this episode, some of the atmosphere, is some of the best we've had in the show. There's a couple of shots of like once they're stranded on the ship because the boat they came on is like stolen by some whaling pirates. More on that in a bit. They're secluded, they're alone, they're adrift at sea, and there's a couple of shots of the boat moving through thick fog and things like that as Scully's narrating and like putting down her notes and talking about what's affecting them. It's giving me that kind of creepy, we're lost at sea, maybe that chapter of Dracula that was just turned into a movie. A terrible movie, but in theory it was a nice idea to turn that story into a movie, because you're at sea, there's no one to help you, you're kind of stranded completely with only a small glimmer of hope of someone finding you, and you have to deal with something on the ship. So many good horror movies and sci-fi movies are set around being stranded on a ship, either at sea or in space or whatever. So all that element of it I really liked. A lot of the visuals of them creeping through the ship with their flashlights, looking for survivors early on. Even just the trip to Norway to begin with was a bit of mood and atmosphere. I did chuckle when the person they end up interacting with the most is another American who just happens to be there. And not that that's unrealistic, there's definitely some Americans living in Norway, but because it's an American TV show that's not actually filming in Norway, I just kind of rolled my eyes a little bit, because obviously they find an American, because they're still shooting this wherever they normally shoot the episodes. Most of it's taking place either on a soundstage with like some sets they've built, or perhaps just a real ship that they've been given permission to use. But I guarantee they didn't go to Norway to film any of this, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But it did make me roll my eyes when I'm like, you couldn't have got a Norwegian guy or someone who can do an accent even, maybe. But regardless, like all of that setup I really liked. The raw mystery of what was going on. I think one of the things that's disappointing about the episode, other than the obvious crappy old age makeup, which is extremely distracting and gets in the way, is kind of the fact that it like all the stuff that Mulder's poking at early on about Philadelphia experiment, about wormholes, about losing time and all that stuff all sounds super interesting. And yeah, you can still argue that what's happening to the water supply that's causing all this seemingly rapid aging is a result of some sort of wormhole trip, some sort of time anomaly that's happened to the ship, and it's created this problem, right? That's like a byproduct of it. And that's fair enough. But ultimately, other than just Mulder and Scully kind of bouncing ideas back and forth, and I think Scully at one point says something to the effect of, oh, there's like maybe two meteors, and they're both like, polar opposites, so they're effectively charging a big part of the ocean like a battery or something. Like, she goes into like a little bit of theorizing as to what's causing this. Like, all that's fine, right? Like, it's decent enough, but it never gave me like that rush of excitement or intrigue where I'm like, oh, that's a really cool idea you've just given me. Because I don't expect them to like solidly answer, especially on X-Files, where they often don't have solid answers by the end of an episode. Part of it is leaving it open to be mysterious. But usually in the better episodes, when there's something going on, they'll give me enough to sort of get my mind going on my own, right? But I don't really feel like I could get my mind going any further with this beyond, like, Mulder and Scully had to do that for me in this episode because there's not really enough for me to do it, if that makes sense. So it's less satisfying on the building the intrigue parts of it than it normally would be in this type of episode. But that does lead to the bigger problem, which is the makeup. It's the, like, couldn't have just had a different effect on people. Just make them sick, perhaps, rather than looking old. Just, it would have been easier to deal with. It would have been easier to just make them look sick with makeup rather than trying to look old. Some people fare better than others. Like, Scully looks a bit better than Mulder does in the old age makeup. But, we see a lot of these other crewmen from the ship in the old age makeup as well, near the start of the episode. Which is a nice little scene with the other boat finding all these like survivors on a lifeboat. Because I think early on I think most people probably assume that there's something that's like a virus that's been passed on. But when you find out it's just the drinking supply, and one of the core plot mechanics of this episode is that the sewage water that's been recycled is in a different supply to the rest of the water, and that's unaffected. So they end up drinking that to stay alive when they realize they're trapped there, and that water won't do anything to them negatively. It's a bit disgusting to think about. I mean, technically it's recycled, but they're still taking scoops of water out of the toilet. It still feels a bit weird. Especially, the mechanics of the characters fighting over that the captain of the boat that brought them here is kind of the prominent guest star of this episode. And the fact that he is willing to kill for like survival, because they find this pirate character who has not aged at all, right? He looks normal, and they find him on the ship. He seemingly has killed the other captain's crewmate, right? And his friends have stolen the boat that they came on, but this captain has stayed behind, and it's this whaling pirate who does not aged. And when he's left alone with our captain character, or what was his name, just so I can call him something, Trondheim, I'll be honest, their photographs here are not helping me because they look obviously 30 years older in these photographs than they do in this episode. Notably, nothing like the old age makeup in this episode either. So they get Trondheim, he's the captain that takes them out there. He's left alone at one point with this whaler pirate who's been tied up, right? And Mulder and Scully are investigating what's going on with the water, because Mulder's noticed that one of the pipes isn't corroding, but all the other ones are. All the other ones are getting rusty, so presumably the water in this one pipe is safe, and, why is it safe? And he follows it with Scully, and they get to the conclusion that because it's separate, it's not been contaminated like the other stuff, and so on and so on. But Trondheim's left alone with the other guy, and this other guy, up until this point, there's been no subtitles for any of the Norwegian, but now we start getting it because they just have a conversation in Norwegian. He basically says he's got a secret to how he stayed alive and how he's not aged like everyone else, and he's willing to tell him this secret. When we cut away and come back, though, Trondheim has killed him, right? He's clearly found out the secret and then killed him. So we get this really kind of spooky, dark moment where he is like drinking from the toilet. He's obviously, this guy knew that the toilet water was safe, but now he's dead, and Trondheim is drinking from the water. And when Mulder and Scully come back, he just feigns that, oh, I fell asleep and the guy got away. I don't know where he went. So they don't know he's actually killed him. In fact, I don't know if they ever even completely find out that he murdered him. I don't know if we ever get, like, because there's never like a, oh, they find the body or something like that. I suppose he could have just thrown it overboard if he was willing to carry him up. Regardless, it sets this idea up that they can't trust each other, that this guy is dangerous, that he's going to look out for himself, and that is a fun element to the episode. I like the mechanics of the, like, okay, in a lot of the same ways that back in season 1, the episode with the bugs and the light and the darkness, and there was rules about the light and the dark. Here, having like a strict supply of something, in this case water, that is very precious. There's not a lot of it. They have to ration it, and an untrustworthy guest star might be willing to kill for it, won't trust Mulder and Scully. I mean, very quickly, Trondheim's saying, hey, Mulder's doing worse than we are. We shouldn't waste any of the good water on him, because he's probably going to die anyway. So Scully's obviously against that. And this guy, Trondheim, eventually locks himself in the sewage sort of like area with the tank, and like drains all the water back to him so that Mulder and Scully can't get any of it, which leads to an insane sequence where Scully has to look through the ship to find any other like sources of like water or liquid that they can use to drink. Because one of the things they find out early on is that the reason why the captain was still alive for a little bit when they get here, because they speak to him before he dies, is that the captain was an alcoholic and had been drinking booze more than he was drinking the water, and that's why he was still alive. He does ultimately still die, but that's why he lasted longer than everyone else. So yeah, Scully is looking throughout the ship. She finds a couple of, like, I think she finds like a can of sardines that she uses the juice from to put into a glass. She gets the water from a snow globe, which does not sound safe. Like, just a few different places, right, she could squeeze some juice or liquid out of, and presents this cup of piss-looking swill that she presents to Mulder. And they're like, okay, Scully, you should drink this because you've got a better chance of survival. And Scully's like, hell with that, I want you to survive. And maybe the other good things about the episode is they have a couple of tender moments before things wrap up where Scully kind of doesn't talk about exactly seeing like this angel that was the nurse or whoever it was back when she had that near-death experience, but she brings it up and kind of implies that she feels confident about there not being anything to fear in dying, that, you know, the afterlife is there and it's not a bad thing. So that was an interesting callback, because that is an experience we saw her have. And as well, I felt that nurse thing was a little bit on the nose at the time. It has happened, and having Scully kind of still, like, you know, remember it and bring it up, it's not something that she's just quickly forgotten. I do like that. I like that has some lasting consequences on Scully's beliefs in terms of spirituality. God, I can't speak tonight. That's all like fine. I think the tone and the mood as like the rescue like guys come in and like find them like lying there asleep. It's just there's a cool, creepy atmosphere, and the sad music as the ship becomes more and more of a death trap. Like I said, the Trondheim ends up drowning in the tank room, because the outer hull of the ship has been corroding this whole time as well. So now water's coming in. So now the inner hull is still holding up. And we find out at the end that it actually sinks less than an hour after Mulder and Scully were rescued. But Scully wakes up in a hospital bed and is told from the doctor that because of the notes she was taking before she passed out, all of her findings and observations, like all of her sort of, like she as a doctor, she was writing down all the observations she could to try and deduce how to battle this, what was causing it. The doctors here were able to use that information to figure out a way to help reverse everything, and particularly in Mulder's case, they thought he was a goner, but Scully's notes saved his life, which is nice. Scully saved Mulder's life for a change, which is cool. So that's also good. I think the big thing, though, is just it comes down to a couple of key things that just hold the episode back a little bit. One is just the old age makeup, like I said. There's nothing else to really say about it other than it just looks a bit goofy at times. This is something that has come up in several TV shows across the years that I've reviewed on the channel. It was bad in the original Star Trek show when they did old age makeup. It's bad here. It's bad in episodes in the future. Occasionally you get a good example of it, but by and large, it doesn't work very well. I think I would have liked something a bit more intriguing as far as like given as a more solid thing to theorize about, in terms of what the cause of this was. They kind of throw around a couple of interesting ideas, but it doesn't feel like there's enough there for me to get excited about and really think about, oh, what does this mean if this is what caused that? I think maybe paring down, or maybe not having the connection to the Philadelphia experiment be something that comes up until later on in the episode, maybe. I'm not sure. But it's almost like the theorization peaked far too early in the episode, so I was waiting for an interesting extra layer to it by the end, and it never quite got there. And then the other thing is probably just that, Mulder and Scully are put in this position in this episode where it seems like they're both certainly dead, and they're trapped at sea, and there's not really anything they do that helps them be found. There's not really any build-up to them being found. It just kind of cuts to a really somber scene where there's a bit of hope in the music and the doors open and these guys come down and get them. But there's not really much of a build-up to it. It kind of feels like just I don't want to say Deus Ex Machina, because they do at least set up that the military or the Navy know where this boat is and that they're probably on their way at some point. So it's not completely out of nowhere. But it does kind of feel like they're in this corner. In terms of writing, they've put the two characters in this corner where it seems like there shouldn't be any way to neatly fix this. So obviously it's going to be fixed, because, like I said at the very start of this review, there's no way that this wasn't going to be something that could be reversed because our main characters are being affected by it. But it does feel like a little bit of a cop-out just to have them wake up and be, yeah, we've got a solution, it's fine, we've fixed it. It does actually remind me a little bit of the ending of the episode that I referenced already. What was the episode called? In the Dark? Something like that? The one with where the bugs came out in the darkness, but they tried to stay in the light. That episode. That one ended very similarly, where it felt like they were kind of like goners, but then they were found and they effectively woke up in a hospital being treated, and the treatment was enough, right? That did the trick, and they're fine. It felt like a very similar ending to that in a lot of ways. Depending on your taste, you might prefer one version of it over the other. That episode ended with a big sort of horror movie moment before the Deus Ex Machina ending. This one went for more of a kind of heartfelt, them pouring their souls to each other before they pass out and possibly die. So this went for more of a character thing, which I think in theory I prefer the two. But I think maybe the other episode was more effective ultimately in what it did. So, so sometimes what I like more on paper isn't necessarily what always pans out in execution, I guess is what I'm saying there. So, yeah, it's a very frustrating episode, all in for me. I like, last episode was a complete and utter trash mess. Like, there was nothing good to say about it. This is different. This does have good qualities. There's still some good, cinematography, nice setting, good tone. Like, there's a lot of things in here to still quite like, for sure. It's just that the actual story of what they're surviving in the boat is just not that exciting to me, and at worst looks quite goofy at times because of the makeup. I think that's ultimately the bigger issue here. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. I don't have too much to add. But there's a lot of good shots in this episode. Everything from the boat stuff early on, before Mulder and Scully were involved, to them arriving at the boat, first looking through it, and then some of the eerie stuff as they're just kind of trying to survive, and it feels hopeless. Some of that stuff was good. I just wish I liked kind of everything mechanically, what it was doing with its with its key illness, its key focus. So yeah, let's have a look and see what's coming next time on the X-Files. Hopefully we've got a step up, because last week was a turd. This week was a mixed bag. Next week we've got an episode called Humbug. So I don't know if we're getting a Christmassy themed episode. This is the description on IMDb. The agents search for a killer in Florida. Sorry, a killer in a Florida town inhabited by a sideshow performers. Okay. I don't know what to make of that description. It sounds like a Florida town, I guess. I guess. I'm sorry. I'm punching down. Florida gets made fun of all the time. All right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Hopefully it's good. I mean, I'll admit the rating in IMDb is a lot higher, so probably the best signifier, if nothing else, is just like how well it seems to be received in general. So hopefully I'm way more optimistic on the next episode, but let me know what you thought of this episode of the X-Files in the comments, and of course you can support all the content by hitting the like button or of course going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting everything with a little bit of money. You can also do that via YouTube memberships if you would like. But any form of support in any way is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?